The night was cruel on the alien world. The sky was hidden by heavy clouds and sharp snowflakes fell like knives from above. The wind howled through the mountains, carrying with it a deadly chill that cut through skin and bone. In the middle of this frozen storm, a young alien girl stumbled through the white wilderness. Her feet sank deep into the snow, her body shaking, her arms wrapped around two tiny newborn daughters. Her skin, pale with a faint glow, was already turning blue from the cold. She had no proper clothes to cover herself, only a torn blanket that she had used to wrap the twins. Their small cries echoed in the storm, weak but desperate, as if begging the universe for mercy. The girl pressed them closer to her chest, trying to shield them with her own warmth, but she was losing strength with every step. Her people had abandoned her. The memory burned in her mind. Hours ago, she had begged her clan to let her stay in the village. She had pleaded for shelter, for food, for fire, anything to keep her daughters alive. But the elders had called her cursed. The twins had been born during the black eclipse, and to them that was a sign of misfortune. "Leave before you bring ruin upon us," they had said. And so she had been pushed out into the snow, left to die with her newborns. Her legs trembled as she walked further into the storm. She could no longer feel her toes. Her breaths were shallow, broken, and every inhale felt like swallowing ice. She knew she could not go on much longer. The twins whimpered softly. Their little faces were red from the cold, their tiny fingers shaking under the thin blanket. The girl's eyes filled with tears, but the wind froze them before they could fall. She whispered weak words to them, her voice barely audible. "Stay. Stay alive, my little ones, please." Her knees finally gave in, and she collapsed into the snow. The world around her turned into a blur of white and gray. The storm raged louder, drowning her in its roar. She held her daughters tighter, her body curling around them like a fragile shield. Her lips trembled as she thought of her final breath. This was the end, or so she believed. Far away, moving slowly across the snowfield, another figure struggled against the storm. A man, taller and broader than any alien she had ever seen, dressed in dark winter gear that looked patched and worn from many travels. His breath formed clouds in the icy air, and in his hand he carried a glowing torch, its light cutting through the darkness. He was not one of her kind. He was something else, something she had only heard in frightening stories told by her people. A human. The man's name was Ethan, though she did not know it yet. He was a wanderer, a survivor on this harsh world, traveling from one ruined outpost to another. He had faced storms before, but this one was worse than most. The snow blinded his vision and the cold bit into his bones. He pushed forward, searching for shelter, when his ears caught a sound that did not belong to the storm. A faint cry. He stopped. At first he thought it was only the wind, but then he heard it again. A small, weak cry, fragile like the mewling of kittens. His instincts sharpened, and he followed the sound, his boots sinking deeper into the snow. And then he saw her. The alien girl was lying almost motionless, her body curled, her arms wrapped tightly around two tiny bundles. Her hair, long and black, was frozen with snow. Her breathing was faint, her face pale, and the twins in her arms let out small, desperate wails. The sight struck Ethan like a knife to the chest. For a moment he hesitated. His mind told him this was dangerous. He knew the local tribes feared and hated humans. If he carried her back, she might betray him. If she died in his arms, it would only bring him more trouble. The smart thing to do would be to walk away. But the sound of the infants crying, he could not ignore it. He stepped closer, kneeling down beside the fallen alien girl. She stirred faintly, her eyes opening just enough to see his shadow. Her vision blurred, but she caught the outline of a strange face, different from her people, and her lips trembled with fear. She thought she was seeing death itself. The human reached out, brushing the snow off her face, then carefully touched the infants. They were ice cold, but alive. Something in his heart refused to let them die here. Without another thought, Ethan lifted the alien girl into his arms, wrapping the twins tightly against her chest. The wind slammed against him, the storm screaming in his ears, but he pressed forward with determination. The alien girl, barely conscious, felt the strange warmth of the human's coat, the strength of his arms. Her last thought before she slipped into unconsciousness was confusion. Why would a human save me? And in that frozen night under the merciless storm, a new story began. The human's choice the storm did not forgive. The snow kept falling harder, and the wind screamed as if the whole sky was angry. Ethan, the human, held the alien girl and her newborn twins close to his chest. His arms were strong, but even he could feel the sharp bite of the cold sneaking under his coat. He knew one thing clearly: if he didn't find shelter soon, all of them would die in the snow. His boots pressed deep into the frozen ground as he moved forward, step by step. Every gust of wind pushed against him like a wall, but he refused to stop. The girl in his arms was weightless, fragile like glass, her breath shallow and broken. The twins gave soft cries, fading but still alive. Each small sound was like a needle piercing Ethan's heart. He thought to himself, "Why am I doing this?" He had learned long ago that survival meant thinking only of yourself. On this planet, food was rare, fire was precious, and trust was dangerous. The local tribes feared humans. They told stories that painted men like Ethan as beasts, hungry monsters who brought only pain. He could not deny that he had been hunted before because of who he was. Helping one of them now could mean trouble. But as he looked down at the two tiny faces pressed together under the blanket, he knew he could never walk away. "This is my choice," he muttered to himself through the storm. His voice was lost to the wind, but his heart grew heavier with each word. At last, after what felt like hours, he reached a cliffside. Hidden between sharp rocks was the dark opening of a cave. Ethan remembered it, an old shelter he had used once before. With trembling arms, he pushed his way inside. The snow no longer fell on him, but the air inside was still bitter cold. He set the girl down gently, laying her against the wall, then quickly pulled out a small bundle from his pack. Inside were dry sticks and a bit of fuel he had saved. His hands moved fast, striking flint until sparks flew. Soon a small flame came alive, growing into a fire that filled the cave with warmth and light. The shadows danced on the rocky walls as the fire crackled. Ethan took the blanket from his pack and wrapped it around the twins. Their cries softened, their small bodies slowly warming in the glow. The alien girl's lips trembled, and for the first time color returned faintly to her cheeks. She was still weak, still half-conscious, but the fire gave her a chance to live. Ethan leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. He had risked everything for them. Now the question came, what next? He looked at her face. She was young, maybe only a little older than a teenager in human years. Her skin was smooth, pale, with a faint bluish tone. Her long black hair was still frozen, sticking to her cheeks. She looked so different, so alien, yet her expression as she held her babies was the same as any human mother, fear mixed with love. After a while, she stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then clear enough to see the strange figure beside the fire. Her heart pounded. She remembered the stories told by her people. Humans are savages. Humans kill. Humans eat the weak. And now, here one was. Her first instinct was fear. Her lips tried to form words, but they came out broken. Why did you bring me here?" she whispered weakly. Ethan did not answer right away. He threw another stick onto the fire, watching the sparks rise. Finally, he looked at her, his eyes calm but serious. "Because you and your children would have died out there," he said simply. His voice was rough, low, but not unkind. The girl's arms tightened around her daughters. Her body shook, not only from the cold but from doubt. Why would a human save her? What did he want in return? Her people always said humans only gave help if they planned to take something later. Ethan noticed her fear. He did not move closer, did not try to touch her again. Instead, he set a small piece of dried meat near her side, just within reach. "Eat," he said. "You need strength." She stared at the food, suspicious. But the hunger in her stomach was too strong. Slowly, she took a small bite, her body desperate for warmth and energy. Her twins, wrapped in blankets, began to calm. Minutes passed in silence. The only sounds were the crackle of the fire and the faint breathing of the children. Ethan leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. But his mind remained alert. He knew this was not the end of danger. If her people discovered he had taken her in, they might. He only watched the fire burn brighter, as if its flames would hold back the darkness of the storm outside. Deep down, though, he knew the answer, because no one deserved to be left to die in the snow. And as the night passed, the choice Ethan had made bound their fates together in ways neither of them could yet understand. Trust in the dark. The fire burned softly inside the cave, pushing back the cold shadows that clung to the rocky walls. Outside, the storm still raged, but here there was warmth, Fragile, temporary, yet enough to keep life alive. The alien girl lay against the wall, her twins wrapped in Ethan's blankets. Their tiny breaths came slow but steady, their fragile bodies recovering from the deadly cold. She opened her eyes again, her vision clearer than before. The flames reflected in her large, dark eyes as she slowly turned her head toward the human. He sat a few steps away, sharpening a small blade with steady movements. The faint glow of the fire highlighted the sharp lines of his face, his tired eyes, and the scars across his cheek. The girl's heart raced. This was no dream. A human was truly here. Her people had told her endless warnings about his kind. They were destroyers, they said. Creatures who killed for sport, who had no soul, who only helped when they wanted to take more later. She had grown up believing those words, fearing the day she might ever see one, and now she was trapped in a cave with one, her newborn daughters lying helpless between them. Her body tensed. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her legs had no strength. She whispered softly, almost like a prayer, "Please, don't hurt them." Ethan stopped sharpening the blade. His eyes lifted to meet hers, calm but heavy with thought. For a moment, silence filled the cave, broken only by the crackle of fire. Then he spoke, his voice steady but low. "If I wanted to hurt you, you wouldn't be here now." The girl's lips trembled. His words were simple, but they struck her like a cold wave. She wanted to believe him, but her fear was stronger. She pulled the twins closer to her chest as if her frail arms could protect them from whatever this human might do. Ethan sighed quietly. He set the blade aside and leaned back against the wall, stretching his legs. He kept a distance, not moving closer, giving her space. "You don't have to trust me," he said, "but I will not let those babies die." The girl's throat tightened. She studied him carefully, the way his shoulders slumped in exhaustion, the way his hands were steady even though the storm outside was fierce. He looked nothing like the monsters in the old tales. Still, her heart whispered doubts. "Why?" she asked again, her voice thin, broken. "Why would a human care?" Ethan stared into the fire for a long time before answering. His eyes carried a shadow of memory, a pain he kept hidden. Finally, he spoke, "Because once someone saved me when they didn't have to." The girl blinked, confused. She wanted to ask more, but her strength was fading again. Still, those words stayed in her heart, echoing against the fear. Hours passed. The storm outside did not calm, and the night stretched endlessly. The fire flickered low, but Ethan fed it carefully, never letting it die. The girl watched him from time to time, her fear slowly mixing with something else. Curiosity. When the twins stirred, crying softly, Ethan did not move closer but passed her a small flask of warmed water. "For them," he said. She hesitated, staring at it like it might be poisoned. But when her daughters whimpered again, she gave in. She dipped her fingers in the warm drops and touched them to the baby's lips. Slowly, they calmed, her eyes lifted toward him again. For the first time, there was not only fear, but also doubt in her own beliefs. The night grew colder and exhaustion weighed on her eyelids. But even as she drifted toward sleep, her mind raced. Could it be possible? Could humans be different from what she had always been told? As her breathing slowed, she heard Ethan's voice again, faint, almost like he was speaking to himself. "They don't have to fear me," he murmured, staring at the twins. "They only need to live." The girl's eyes closed, but his words sank deep inside her, like seeds planted in frozen ground. When morning finally came, the storm outside had calmed, leaving the world covered in white silence. The cave glowed softly in the pale light. The girl stirred awake, her body stronger, her babies warm in her arms. She looked at the human, who had not slept at all. He sat near the entrance, keeping watch, his rifle resting across his lap. Her heart beat faster as she realized something. He had stayed awake not for himself, but for them. He had protected them while they slept. Fear still lingered, but now it mixed with something new, something fragile, something dangerous, the first spark of trust. Shadows of the past, the morning light spilled across the snow, turning the world outside the cave into a blinding sheet of white. The storm had passed, but the silence that followed felt heavier, almost unnatural. Inside the cave, the fire still burned weakly, giving off enough warmth to keep the air alive. The alien girl sat against the wall, her newborn twin sleeping in her arms. Their tiny faces relaxed for the first time since the night of terror. She looked toward the human. Then he was seated near the cave's mouth, scanning the horizon with steady eyes. His rifle rested across his knees, ready at a moment's notice. He had stayed awake through the entire night. She knew this because every time she stirred, he was still there, watching, guarding, silent. The girl lowered her eyes, her heart restless. Why was he doing this? Why was a human of all creatures protecting her and her daughters? The question dug into her mind like a thorn. Her lips parted softly and her voice came weak but steady. You did not sleep. Ethan did not turn his head. Couldn't risk it, he said simply. Wolves roam after storms, and I wasn't going to let them find you here. His words carried weight but no pride, just fact. The girl blinked slowly, her chest tight. He had risked his own strength, his own life for someone he did not know. Still fear and doubt clung to her. The shadows of her past whispered louder than the warmth of the fire. She closed her eyes, her mind pulling her back. Back to the night of her exile. Her people's faces haunted her, cold, unforgiving. The elders stood tall in the village square, their cloaks heavy with fur, their voices sharp with judgment. She had begged them, clutching her crying infants, her knees sinking into the snow. Please, she had cried. They are innocent. They are only children. But their eyes were hard as stone. The eldest one raised a hand, silencing her. They were born under the eclipse, a sign of darkness. Misfortune will follow them, and through them it will follow us all. Leave or bring ruin upon your kin. Her own blood had turned against her. Neighbors who once smiled at her now looked away in silence, some even spitting at her feet as she was pushed from the village. Alone, weak, cast into the storm with nothing but a torn blanket and 2 fragile lives to protect. Her chest ached at the memory. Tears gathered in her eyes, though she tried to blink them away. Her daughters shifted faintly in her arms, and she kissed their foreheads, whispering to herself, "You are not cursed. You are not cursed." Ethan's voice broke her silence. "You talk in your sleep," he said calmly, still watching the snow outside. Her body stiffened. What did I say? That your people abandoned you." His voice was quiet but firm, not mocking, not questioning. "That they called your children cursed." Her heart sank. She turned her face away, shame burning her cheeks. She had not wanted him to know. The wounds of her past were hers to bear, not for a stranger, especially not for a human. But then Ethan added, his tone like iron. "They were wrong." The girl froze. Slowly, she looked at him. His face was serious, his eyes sharp, but there was no lie in them. "Children are never a curse," he said. "Their life. Their hope. Anyone who thinks otherwise is blind." The words struck her like lightning. For so long she had carried the weight of her people's judgment. For so long she had almost believed them. But here was a human, the kind of being her tribe had always called a monster, saying the very opposite. Her lips trembled. You really believe that?" Ethan finally turned to face her, his gaze steady, unshaken. "I've seen enough death to know the difference between a curse and a gift. Those children? They're gifts, and I won't let them be lost to the snow." Silence followed, heavy but different this time. The fire crackled softly between them. The girl stared at him, her heart beating faster, not with fear, but with something unfamiliar. Could she dare to believe his words? Could she let herself trust? Before she could answer, a sound echoed faintly, and as Ethan raised his rifle, ready to face the wild storm of teeth and claws, the girl realized that the shadows of her past were no longer her only fear. Now the present was about to test whether trust in the dark was truly possible. The first battle, the growls grew louder, echoing in the frozen silence outside the cave. The fire inside flickered nervously, as if even the flames felt the danger coming closer. The alien girl pressed her newborn twins tightly to her chest. Her breath came fast, her heart racing in panic. She could see shadows moving just beyond the entrance, pacing back and forth, waiting for the right moment to strike. Ethan stood tall at the cave mouth, rifle in his hands, his eyes steady. The icy wind blew across his face, carrying with it the sharp scent of the wolves. He had fought them before, he knew their hunger, their cunning, their patience. These were not ordinary beasts. They hunted in packs. They struck fast, and they tore apart anything weaker than them. The first set of glowing eyes appeared in the darkness. Then another, and another. Soon at least 6 pairs of eyes shone like burning coals in the snow. Their bodies were lean and long, their white fur blending almost perfectly into the frozen landscape. Only their teeth, sharp and dripping with hunger, stood out in the pale light. The girl whispered through trembling lips, They'll kill us." Ethan didn't turn his head. His voice was firm, steady, almost calm. "Not while I'm here. The words carried power. For a moment, they wrapped around her fear like a fragile shield. Still, she held her daughters tighter, rocking them softly as if her love alone could protect them. The first wolf stepped forward, its paws crunching the snow. Its growl turned into a vicious snarl as it lowered its head ready to spring. Ethan raised his rifle, aiming carefully. The silence broke with a crack of energy. A bright flash lit the night, and the first wolf dropped into the snow, its body still. The others roared in fury. They lunged together. Ethan fired again, his shots sharp and fast, but the wolves were quicker than the storm. Two leapt at once, one from the front and one from the side. Ethan spun, smashing the butt of his rifle into the nearest beast. It yelped but snapped back, its claws raking across his coat. Another wolf clamped its jaws on his arm, but he kicked hard, throwing it aside. The cave echoed with the chaos of snarls, gunfire, and Ethan's heavy breaths. Sparks flew as claws scraped against the stone. The girl cried out, pressing herself deeper against the wall, shielding the infants with her own body. Tears filled her eyes. She wanted to help, but she was weak, helpless. All she could do was watch the human fight. Blood stained the snow at the cave entrance, some from wolves, some from Ethan. But he did not fall. His arms moved with purpose, his rifle roaring with every pull of the trigger. When the gun clicked empty, he tossed it aside without hesitation and drew his knife, a blade sharp and deadly in his hand. A wolf pounced, fangs aiming for his throat. He ducked low, slashing upward, cutting across its chest. Another lunged from behind, and he spun, stabbing hard into its side. He fought like a man who had survived countless battles, a man who knew that giving up meant death. The girl's breath caught in her chest. For the first time, she did not see a monster. She saw a protector. The battle raged on. The wolves circled, growling. Their numbers fewer now, but their hunger stronger. One wolf, larger than the rest, the alpha, stepped forward. Its eyes glowed brighter, its fangs longer, its growl deeper. The others fell back slightly, waiting for their leader's command. The alpha charged. Ethan braced himself, knife ready. The beast was massive, its body slamming into him like a wall of fur and muscle. They crashed against the stone, the knife barely holding the jaws back from his throat. The girl screamed, her heart pounding in terror. For a moment, it seemed the human would fall. The wolf's strength was overwhelming, its claws tearing into his coat, its breath hot and foul on his face. But Ethan's eyes burned with fire. With a roar of his own, he twisted his body, driving the blade deep into the beast's neck. The alpha howled, thrashing wildly, then collapsed in the snow. The pack froze. Their leader lay still, his blood spreading across the white ground. Slowly, one by one, the surviving wolves backed away, their growls fading into silence. Then, without another sound, they turned and disappeared into the storm. The cave was quiet again. Only the crackle of the fire and the heavy breathing of the human remained. Ethan stood there for a moment, his chest heaving, his hands shaking from the effort. Blood dripped from a gash on his arm, staining the snow at his feet. He wiped his blade clean, picked up his rifle, and turned back toward the cave. The alien girl stared at him with wide eyes. Her fear was still there, but it was mixed now with something else. Shock, awe, even respect. He had fought not for himself, but for her. For her daughters, for lives that were not even his own. Her lips trembled as she whispered, You saved us." Ethan's expression was hard, but his eyes softened slightly as he looked at the tiny twins sleeping safely in her arms. "I told you," he said, his voice low but steady. "As long as I'm here, nothing will touch them." The girl felt her chest tighten, her heart pulled in two directions. Fear of who he was and the growing truth of what he had done. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But in that moment, one thing was clear. The human was no monster. He was their shield. And in the snow-stained silence of the cave, trust began to grow, fragile but real like the first flame in endless darkness. Bonds beyond species. The cave was silent now, except for the gentle crackle of the fire. The snow outside lay stained with the red marks of battle, a grim reminder of the danger that had just passed. Ethan sat near the entrance, his rifle laid beside him, his arm wrapped with a strip of cloth to stop the bleeding. His breaths were heavy but steady. He had survived worse before, and he knew pain was just another part of life. Behind him, the alien girl sat against the wall, her twins nestled in her arms. They slept peacefully, their small faces calm, untouched by the violence that had raged only moments ago. She kept looking at them, then back at the human, her heart filled with questions she could not answer. Why had he fought so hard for them? Why had he risked his life when he could have walked away? Her people had always told her that humans were selfish beasts. Yet this human had stood like a wall between death and her children. That truth clashed with everything she had been taught, leaving her lost between fear and gratitude. Ethan finally broke the silence. His voice was rough but calm. "You should rest. You've been through enough." The girl hesitated. You are hurt." Ethan glanced at his arm. Blood had soaked through the cloth, but he shrugged. "It's nothing. I've had worse." Her brow furrowed. For the first time she shifted carefully, placing her daughters in a blanket nest beside her. Weakly she crawled closer, her hands trembling. Ethan tensed, unused to anyone approaching him without suspicion. But she surprised him by gently reaching for his arm. I can help," she whispered. Her touch was soft, careful. Using a small pouch hidden in her clothes, she pulled out crushed herbs, one of the few things she had managed to save when her people cast her out. She pressed them against his wound, the scent sharp but soothing. Ethan winced, but he didn't pull away. Her hands moved with care, binding the herbs in place with strips of cloth. "There," she said softly, almost to herself. "It will heal faster." Ethan studied her face, the faint glow in her skin, the determination in her eyes despite her weakness. For a long moment neither spoke. Then finally he nodded. "Thank you." The girl's lips parted in surprise. No one had ever thanked her before, not truly. She lowered her eyes, her cheeks warming. "You saved me first." The fire between them crackled louder, as if marking the moment. Days passed. The storm outside weakened, but the world remained a frozen wasteland. Inside the cave, a strange rhythm began to form. Ethan hunted small animals for food, his figure moving through the snow with skill and silence. He brought back firewood, kept the cave warm, and repaired his gear. The girl cared for the twins, feeding them, singing soft lullabies in a language Ethan did not understand. But sometimes she caught him listening quietly, his expression softer than usual. Slowly, their walls began to break. She told him her name, Leora. It was the first secret she had shared with him. Her voice shook when she said it, as if giving her name to a human was dangerous. But Ethan only nodded and repeated it, making it sound solid, safe. Leora, in return, he told her his own. "Ethan." The sound felt heavy, foreign to her ears, but she whispered it back, holding it in her heart. Conversations grew from silence. She asked about humans, about where he came from. He told her stories of distant stars, of ruined cities where humans once thrived, of battles fought not for glory but survival. His words were rough, simple, but they carried weight. She listened, her eyes wide with wonder. In turn, she told him of her people, their traditions, their songs, their belief in the stars and the curses of eclipses. Her voice shook when she spoke of how they had abandoned her. Ethan said nothing at first, only listened. Then he answered with words she never thought she'd hear. "They were wrong to cast you out." Her throat tightened. As the days blended, something else began to grow in the cave. It was fragile, invisible but undeniable. Trust. When Leora's daughters cried at night, Ethan would fetch warm water or adjust the fire without her asking. When Ethan's wound reopened, Leora would quietly redress it, her hands steady, her touch gentle. They learned to move around each other, not as strangers bound by chance, but as companions bound by survival. One night, as snow drifted softly outside, the twins slept peacefully in their blankets. Leora sat closer to the fire, her voice soft as she hummed a song from her childhood. Ethan sat nearby, sharpening his knife. For a long while, neither spoke. Then Leora whispered, her voice barely audible. "All my life, I thought humans were monsters." Ethan paused, his eyes lifting to her. He said nothing, waiting. "But you," she continued, her gaze fixed on the flames. "You are not what they told me." "You are—" Her voice faltered, her cheeks warming. "Different." Ethan's chest tightened. He had been called many things in his life, beast, outcast, danger, but never different in a way that sounded like hope. He set his knife down slowly. "Maybe," he said, his tone quiet. "Or maybe monsters are just what people choose to see." Leora's eyes met his then. For the first time, she did not look away. The shadows between them seemed to thin, replaced by the fragile light of something new. Her twins stirred in their sleep, reaching tiny hands outward. Ethan instinctively extended his hand to adjust their blanket. One of the infants curled her tiny fingers around his thumb, holding it tightly. Leora's breath caught. Her daughters, who had known only rejection from their own people, clung to him without fear. And in that moment, Leora realized the truth. Perhaps monsters could become protectors. Perhaps strangers could become family. Perhaps bonds could grow, even beyond species. A new beginning. The storm had passed. Days had turned into nights and nights into days, yet inside the small cave life had begun to take root. The fire no longer felt like a fragile shield against death. It had become a symbol of survival, of something stronger than fear. Leora sat near the fire, her twins asleep in her arms. Their tiny breaths came soft and steady, their cheeks full of warmth and color. Only a short time ago she had believed they would die in the snow. But now here they were, alive, safe, growing stronger each day. She pressed her lips to their foreheads, whispering blessings in her language. Ethan sat nearby, repairing his gear. His coat bore patches of old battles, and his rifle carried new scratches from the wolf attack, but his hands worked with calm focus. He was a man shaped by survival. Yet the lines in his face had softened since meeting Leora and her children. For the first time in years, his solitude no longer felt like a burden. The silence of the morning was peaceful, yet heavy with unspoken thoughts. Both of them knew this peace could not last forever. Leora finally broke the silence. "When the snow clears," she said softly, "you will leave. Won't you?" Ethan paused, his hand tightening around the strap he was fixing. He didn't answer immediately. His eyes moved to the twins, then to her, then back to the fire. "I can't stay in one place too long," he admitted. "Humans aren't welcome here. If your people found me with you—" Her heart clenched. She lowered her eyes, her voice trembling. "They already cast me out. I have no people now." The words hung in the air like smoke. Ethan's chest tightened. He knew the pain of exile, the sting of being unwanted. In her words he heard an echo of himself. After a long silence he spoke again. "Maybe you don't need them anymore." Her eyes lifted slowly, searching his face. "And what do I need?" Ethan's gaze softened. He glanced at the twins, their small hands curled against her chest. "You need family. And so do they." Leora's throat tightened. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust those words. But fear still lived in her heart. Could a human truly be part of their lives? Could she risk it? Before she could answer, the sound of crunching snow echoed outside. Her body stiffened, terror flashing in her eyes. "Someone's coming," she whispered. Ethan was already on his feet, rifle in hand, eyes narrowing toward the cave entrance. The footsteps grew louder, closer, accompanied by low voices. Shadows appeared outside the cave. Leora's heart sank. She recognized the language. Her people. They had come. Her arms tightened around her daughters. Panic rushed through her. If they found her with a human, they would kill him without question. Worse, they might take her children and finish what they had begun when they cast her out. Ethan's stance was firm, his weapon ready. He whispered without looking at her, "Stay back. Don't let them near the children." But before the first villager stepped inside, Leora moved. She stood up, trembling but with a strength born of desperation. She stepped in front of Ethan, placing herself between him and the shadows at the cave's mouth. Her voice shook but did not break. "No," the figures outside paused. "Leora," one of the voices called, sharp with disbelief. "You live?" She swallowed hard, lifting her chin. "Yes, and my daughters live too. Because a human saved us." A shocked silence followed. The villagers muttered among themselves, their fear mixing with disgust. "A human?" one spat. "You shame yourself. You shame us all." Ethan raised his rifle slightly, ready to fight, but Leora turned, her hand on his arm. Her eyes met his, filled with courage he had not seen before. "Not this time," she whispered. She turned back to her people. Her voice grew stronger, louder. "You called my daughters cursed. You left us to die. But this human, this man you call a monster, fought the storm, the wolves, and death itself to protect us. Tell me then, who is the true monster? Him or you?" The villagers shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away, shame flickering in their eyes. Others clenched their fists, still chained by their fear of curses. But none stepped forward. None dared. Finally, the shadows withdrew. Their footsteps faded into the snow, leaving only silence behind. Leora's knees nearly gave out, but Ethan's steady hand caught her. She turned to him, her heart pounding.